Now, so much for the cause of inflation. It's very easy to say what the cure is. There's no problem how to stop inflation. That's the easiest thing in the world to say. In order to stop inflation, you have to have the government spend less and print less. That's the only way you're going to stop inflation. That's the one and only cure. But you know, the real problem isn't to know how to cure inflation. The real problem is to have the political will to do so. If I may go back to my medical analogy, some years ago my physician told me about a young man who was a patient of his who had a debilitating disease, as a result of which his fingers were threatening to fall off, his toes were threatening to fall off. And my physician said, you know, that young man could be cured in no time. The only thing he has to do to be cured is to stop smoking. But I cannot in any way bring him to stop smoking. He refuses to do it. Now, the disease was curable in one sense, but it was not easy to do it. An analogy that in some ways is much closer to the problem of inflation. It's a very literal analogy, but also something of a medical analogy, is alcoholism. The thing about alcoholism is that when you go out on a toot, the good effects come first, and the bad effects only come the next morning when you have the hangover. Now that's exactly the way it is with inflation. When you start inflating, the good effects come first. After all, the government's printing money, everybody thinks he's richer, he's got all these pieces of paper. And initially it does have that effect. It makes business good, it expands output. It's only after a while, when it works its way through to inflation, that the bad effects come later, and you then have inflation. Similarly, on the other side, the great problem in curing an alcoholic is that the bad effects come first, and the good effects come later when you try to cure it. If a man who has been subject to a craving for alcohol goes off the wagon, it's terrible. He's got a terrible time getting rid of his craving. But if he once can succeed in doing so, everything will be fine. It's exactly the same thing with inflation. If you succeed in slowing down inflation, you will initially have some very difficult times. Just as inflating stimulates the economy temporarily, so slowing down inflation slows down the economy temporarily.